Fáilte everyone to the first panel of Galway Pride 2021. This is the Road to Pride panel, a discussion all about organising the history and the future of Pride and specifically Galway Pride. We have here today three amazing panelists who have been involved over the years in making Pride happen, and Pride does not happen, as we all know, without a lot of manpower, blood, sweat and tears. And so we're going to get into that and talk about what makes Pride happen. Nuala, thanks for joining us. When was your first Pride, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Nuala Bród. My first Pride was in Galway. I learned about Pride around 1986, 87 from older lesbian women that I had met, and I really wanted to have one in Galway. At the time, people that I knew would leave Galway and head off to London for Pride or go to the States or whatever. And there was a few people heading to London and were saying, come along. But I didn't want to participate in a Pride parade anywhere until I could do it where I lived. So each year I would ask people to, will we do one? And eventually Jane Talbot and Natalie Zabel, two friends of mine and allies of the LGBTQ plus community, said that they would march with me. So that was on a Thursday evening, and on a Saturday, that my first Pride parade was down Shop Street with 15 people, down as far from Eyre Square, down as far as the Quays. And then we all the heterosexual people and our allies went into the Quays to celebrate. And there was 3 lesbian women on that parade, and we all went off to work. That was it. That was my first Pride. And it didn't really hit me the importance of it until probably 8 or 9 years later,
I think the fact that your first Pride was Galway's first Pride, and your first Pride was one you organised yourself, I think that's such an amazing story. I think that's such an achievement. Well done, Nuala.
Well, with Natalie and Jane helped. I didn't know anything about organising parades and stuff, but it was really important to do it because we had just set up the Lesbian and Gay Helpline in 88, and just from all the different kinds of calls we got from people all over the West and Midlands and Northwest, as well as people who had emigrated because they couldn't live here in Ireland the way things were and be themselves at the same time. So it was like learning all these things constantly, and the importance of visibility became even more apparent. And I felt that, by not being visible and not having something out there, that we were just kind of playing into the whole myths about LGBTQ plus people and the whole scene being an underground, seedy, degenerate kind of movement or something, which isn't the case. So yeah, it was just important for me.
I think it's really interesting that you said you didn't really find the significance until 8 or 9 years after you had started it. What kept you going so in between while you didn't see the significance? Why did you feel it was so important to keep it going every year?
Well, every year, there was always something. The big thing was trying to keep the helplines going. We started out with the helpline as one, lesbian and gay, and the more we learned, then it grew, and we had 2 helplines operating, men and women, but we took calls, both helplines, from everyone, and it was just the kind of calls we were getting and the importance and the significance for people both living here and who lived here and would be home on holidays and stuff, for them knowing that there was something happening and it was visible, and like so many people say, like by the third year would come to Galway because of the parade. Now there would only be about 30 people on the parade, but there'd probably be 100 or so shopping on the day, having a look, you know, and you would know people, but you wouldn't wave to them because you wouldn't want to be outing them. And at that time, there's the whole kind of, you know, guilty by association thing going on. So people, you know, we'd be very respectful of each other. It might sometimes, you know, could be a really good friend, but, you know, you wouldn't go, hey, like you do today on the parade, just in case somebody would see, because you'd lose your job, or you could, oh God knows, you know, what would happen to you. It's different in that way back then. So it was important to keep it going and to have one every year, regardless of what else was going on. And that's one of the things I love is that, and the whole focus was on community. You know, we didn't have chairperson or treasurer or anything. If there was money needed for something, it would be, well, here's a pound, or here, you know, we'd throw a few quid together amongst us and get what was needed. But yeah, it was really important to have it, and it became a focal point. Although I have to say too, some people in the community did not like that we were having a parade, because they felt like one woman was saying, you know, it's crazy marching down, putting ourselves on show for everyone to be laughing at. So like it wasn't, most people felt it was really important, but some people didn't think it should be happening, and that we were attracting attention, and the wrong kind of attention. And that has had an element of truth in it, but we were attracting attention because that's what visibility is about, and creating a conversation so that you could, you know, it wasn't just a parade and way, hey, like it was about highlighting we are being treated differently to our heterosexual peers, and it's not right, and we want change. And we would highlight different things. I think it was 97, we did a whole marriage thing with two Fergal, Timon and Des Goff, where the groom and the groom, or the bride and the bride, whatever, you know, and that created a conversation. And I think mostly in general society, most people, you know, didn't really realize all the different issues and how difficult it was, and still is to a certain extent, for LGBTQ people just to be themselves and to be afforded the same services and supports and rights and responsibilities and obligations as everyone else. And that's really what it was all about. And the impact of not being treated the same as everyone else was having on all age groups. You know, like sometimes the one thing that really got me was people who would get married and have children and try to conform to the whole way that it was expected of people to be. And then realizing, you know, they can't keep doing this, and wanting to be out and wanting to be themselves, but then not being able to because they might not see their children anymore. They would lose their family. So being caught in this horrendous, you know, that you can't do right for doing wrong, or you can't do wrong for doing right, and just just the whole effort and the mental exhaustion and stress it was having on people trying to conform to what was perceived to be the norm. And then when they were trying to come out of that, and lots of people would come out of that, and that was amazing. Like seeing so many people of all ages in their like late 30s, 40s, 50s being out for the first time at a Pride event, say like the Saturday night or whatever. And they were just, it was like they were finally living their teenage years and being who they are for the first time. But huge amount of baggage accumulated over the years of trying to do what was perceived to be the right thing. And, you know, I could keep on and on and on, and you know yourselves what I'm talking about. But yeah, Pride's really important, and the parade is really important, and it's important to, you know, celebrate things and achievements and all of that, but to highlight all the issues as well and protest about what's not right, whether it be here in Ireland or in some other country, because, you know, we're all part of the same world, and the world is getting smaller all the time, really, and you know, we need to, you know, not take anything for granted, because nothing's come easy, but it can go like that. So, you know, we need to, you know, keep Pride going, keep the parade going, and keep all the sports and services that are needed going.
I think that you're great. No, you're here to talk, so that's good. But I think you do really sum it up well in terms of, you know, it took a long time to get to where we are now. And I think it's easy maybe for some people who are new to Pride or younger members of the community to not see that journey and to not see how long it took. And I think you wrote for us a great summary of the history of Pride going back to the early days, even before there was a parade. And we're going to post that on our social media just so there is a bit more of that written memory written down for people to look back on, because I think a lot of our community stories are told orally. And I think it's good that we start to write some of these stories down as much as possible, so that, you know, the newer members of the community, whatever age they're coming to join the community or coming out visibly to join the community, know that history. But Rob, as you were saying, for Nuala, her first Pride was Galway's first Pride, but your first Pride wasn't your first time organising a Pride. So how did you go on the journey from being an attendee to organising?
So, as I said, my first Pride was accidental. I just happened to be in town when this 5 days of fun was going on. And the following year, I know one of the bar owners in Birmingham decided to start organising a Pride. I think this was 96 when they started organising, because the first Pride was 97. And this rumour went around Birmingham about how this bar owner, and when I say rumour, it's true what I'm about to say. So this bar owner went to the chief constable or whoever was in charge of Birmingham police and said, we want to close off some of the streets and do this. And he said, yep, no problem. And wrote him a little handwritten note and said, take that to the local police station. And off he went, and into the local police station, he said, we want to close these roads off. And the guy on the front desk said, over my dead body. And just hearing that, I suddenly thought, what right have you got to stop me from celebrating and from being part of something? And as soon as I heard that, I thought, right, I'm volunteering. And I volunteered at the first Birmingham Pride, and I had one of the worst jobs. I was manning one of the gates that people were coming in and out of. I was as far away from the actual main event as I could be, and I was there for about 8 hours. But I absolutely loved it. I loved being part of the group, being part of the community. I loved letting people in and out, and they were asking me where's things going on, and the fact that I knew where everything was happening, I just such a buzz from it. Even though I wasn't even part of the main stuff, I was just stood on a gate. I absolutely loved it, and I think there was around about 200 odd volunteers that first year. and getting us all together leading up to it. It didn't matter what job you'd got, just being part of it, you felt something special. And the following year, I joined the organising committee and absolutely loved it. And from there, I've had my ups and downs with Pride. There's some Pride festivals that have gone on that I've absolutely hated. I thought you're doing this for the wrong reasons. But on more often than not, I think just the whole feel, the community feel of it, coming together and doing something as a group, regardless of what community, what subculture you belong to, just all being part of one big family and showing that we are all part of one big family. That to me, that's one big, massive reason to get involved with these things. But also, one of my other reasons for getting involved with Pride was when obviously in '97, I was 20 something. Let's not put an actual number on it because we don't like to talk about those things. And it's the realization that growing up, there was nothing like that I could access, that I needed to find out about my community. There was nothing nowhere I could go to find people like myself and just say, look, this is how I'm feeling. Is this right? Because I went through that whole, there's something wrong with me kind of phase, and trying to work out what it was, not really understanding the emotions I was going through. And I never, ever want anybody to feel like they have no one that they can talk to. And I think Pride, promoting itself throughout the 12 months leading up to the next festival and so on, it's one place where you could go and you could find that bit of information. Even if that was nothing to do with what you wanted, you could find someone who could possibly tell you where to go. And to keep that going, I think that's so important.
Yeah, it really is like the greatest campfire our community has to bring people together and start conversations. But I love to hear that you started as a volunteer, because volunteers are important and so important to every Pride.
Yeah, you can't put a Pride on without people, even the committees that are volunteers. Now, I know with many Prides now around the world, they've become companies and they have paid CEOs. And, if that's the way they want to go, that's fine. I don't agree with people charging for Pride and entry into Pride, and I never, ever will. I don't care who's on your main stage. You raise money to pay for those acts. You don't charge entry to your, to an event that's celebrating our way of life. I hate the idea of charging for it, but I have no problem with Prides becoming official companies, because I think it's a good way of protecting what money comes in, and it's a good way of protecting the committee who are working hard to put on these events. So that kind of thing I don't mind, but but without the volunteers, without the people prepared to give up their time and stand on these gates for 8 hours, you're not going to get the event to go on. Without the people who walk at the very back of the parade, who see nothing, because by the time you're at the back, things are petering out. The people who go ahead and miss hearing all the cheers from the crowds as you're walking through, because they're ahead making sure that the way is clear. These kind of volunteers who are prepared to give up the kind of good things that are going on to be part of it, these people are like gold, and they need to be treated as such. We couldn't go ahead without people like that. Absolutely.
So Rob, when did you make the trip and first start getting involved with Galway Pride?
So 2015 was actually my first Galway Pride that I attended properly. I'd been to previous ones, but as it's on, let's go and see what's going on kind of thing. And 2015, I was asked to be part of one of the events, and I loved it, and I carried on. I was actually part of two events that year, and I loved it. And I thought, do you know what? I think I'm going to volunteer to help out next year. And I think I'm going to stop there, because obviously most of us know what happened between leading up to the 2016 Pride. So that was fun. I became part of the 2016 Pride, and then also part of the 2017 Pride. Yeah.
And we try to cover that as delicately as possible in that little summary of the history of Pride. And I suppose it's always important. There are always conversations within the community as well about what is Pride for and what is it meant to, stand for. And so those debates are always happening in one way or another. I suppose, Rob, how does the experience differ? Because I imagine Galway compared to Birmingham, quite a different scale of event. How does it differ?
Yes and no. Completely different scales of events. But if you think Galway started before Birmingham, and we're talking, nearly 10 years before the first Birmingham Pride. Yes, Birmingham had these 5 days of fun, but there was nothing political about it. It wasn't called a Pride. So yes, they had that. But for Galway to be first before Birmingham, I think that's huge. And although Birmingham Pride is a lot bigger than Galway Pride, and the technicalities around it might be a lot more intrinsic than Galway Pride, you have to realise that Birmingham alone, the population of Birmingham is more than the population of the whole of Ireland. So we have those extra bodies to help us out with. And 97, I think our working budget, we worked it out, was going to be around about 18,000, and we raised 11,000. And we started getting on the day taking donations from various people, and by the end of the entire weekend we'd raised over 30,000, and that was 97. And to think that as a Pride we raised over £30,000 in 97 just from people donating, giving things, companies. We decided we were going to be self-sufficient, so we had no money off the councils. So to say that we did all that and try and equate it to Galway Pride, I think is nigh on impossible. The work that went into Birmingham Pride is equal to the work that goes on into Galway Pride. It's just on a smaller scale. And if anything, Galway Pride people work harder because we have less resources and less people to help us out do the things that we do. Mm-hmm. So yes, Birmingham Pride is big. It's on a big scale. Birmingham Pride is nice. They now have big artists and they charge people to come in, and it's just horrendous. Galway Pride, they work hard to put on the exact same feeling of an event, and I think Galway Pride has a lot to be proud of.
So Nuala, you've had experiences of organising for a long time, and you've attended Prides just as an attendee, although you're often speaking and involved in them. I suppose, how does the experience differ, being actively involved versus just being an attendee, and where would some of your favourite memories come from?
Favourite memories? Well, it's really different showing up and just enjoying every minute and soaking up the wonderful atmosphere and meeting new people and bumping into people you haven't seen for years and all of that. That's, it's great to go to something that you have nothing to do with organising. And because I would have been involved, I was involved in the first Prides up to 99, and then it took a step back. There's always a time, I think, no matter who you are or what you're doing, to take a step back, especially when it's all about community and community focus. You need to pull back and enjoy it, as well as it's important to be able to enjoy it. And I think it's quite different now, organising Pride, than it was back then. Back then, we would have it as close to the weekend of the first Stonewall riots would happen. And then it'd be go down to the Garda station and hope you'd be somebody there, but just to let them know, you might get a good reception, you might not. And of course, that has completely changed too now, but that's how it was back then. And you'd pick a date and a time, and then maybe a theme, and we'd try and have something so that people, could dress up and could be part of the parade anonymously and things like that. Then insurance came into it and all this other huge amount of stuff that takes an awful lot of time and energy and effort and just hard bloody work. And I'm very aware of that from a lot of people of giving of their time. And that's what makes it happen. And I also know, a lot of people would come along and, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to always please everybody all of the time and have something to suit absolutely everybody. That's just impossible. But the one thing I can say about Galway Pride throughout the years is that they've really worked to try and do that and bring people on board. Like in the earlier years, you would have people saying, oh, there isn't this, there isn't that. And then you say, well, come and get involved next year then and we'll make it happen. And that's kind of how it evolved. Though even, I just want to say, before the first Pride Parade, Pride was celebrated in Galway, even in, back in the 70s. The different things on a very small scale would happen for, to mark Pride and have a celebration, whether it be meeting up in the pub or going for walks or cycles or something. And then from 88, we did have, we'd have workshops or we'd meet up, we would mark it, celebrate it in some way. But, I think the parade was important to open it up. And one of my memories, and I suppose it's to do with me realizing, because sometimes, depending on who you were talking with, you might be having a conversation with someone who think it's a waste of time, the parade, all negative stuff, and then you'd be trying to consider that and is it a waste of time, and is it, but a few years, probably might have been 97-ish, 96, 97, and a young man came up to me and he said, introduced himself, and he said, I was going with Mammy to Roach's stores, where Marks and Spencer's was, that was called Roach's stores, to do the shopping. And he saw the first parade. And he said he didn't know what it was, but he knew it was to do with him. And he was like, and look at me now. And he was out. And that, to me, summed it up, because lots of people have came up to me over the years, and I'm sure to other people who've been involved in organising Pride, who would have had similar experiences. And that's what visibility is all about. Reaching people who are kind of lost because they don't know, they don't click, they don't fit in, they don't whatever, they're feeling all this negative stuff. But then they see the parade and they're like, that's me going down there in some form. It was that conversation that I had heading out from Ayr Square with this young man. I don't know how old he was at the time, maybe 10 or 11 or something. And that's what it's all about. That's one of my favourite memories. The other one is, over the years, just, walking along, sometimes I might stand aside and just see it. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the reaction from people is completely different as well. People actually go out to see it, pre-pandemic days, but, go out to see the parade. That really didn't happen before. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you'll see like families not even aware that it was coming, and then it's coming, and then parents will explain to their kids what it all means and what it all stands for. So there's a whole new culture there that's built up. But obviously we can't have a parade this year, but we hopefully will have a big gathering in Salthill Park on the Saturday of Pride that will still give us that same sense of community and same chance to safely come and meet together. Rob, do you have any favourite memories of Pride over the years?
Oh, wow, I have quite a few. As I said, my first being a volunteer, standing on that gate for 8 hours, that will always be, that will always be a very fond memory. Again, even though I was in just this really boring position, being away from everybody, just being part of it was, that will always be in my head. I think 2015 Pride, Galway Pride, will always be a very special one. I got a phone call from a friend and she said, "You used to do drag, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "We're a bit short of numbers for one of the drag shows. Is there any chance you'd enter just to make up the numbers?" And I'm like, okay. And I wasn't in the mood. I wasn't prepared. And I went along and won this drag race. And I absolutely loved it. And it was one of the best experiences of Pride, just being up there. Kiki Sinclair was our fabulous and glamorous host, and she did an amazing job. And just being part of that event will always be one of my fondest memories, because I had such a blast, and to go on and win was just amazing. And similar to Nuala, the 2017 Pride, I was chair for that Pride, and on the night, everything was slowly shutting down. We'd had fantastic weather. We'd had no rain. It was absolutely glorious. And I was drenched in sweat because I'd been dancing. I'd been running around, looking at everything. I'd been wearing high heels because I was doing drag for some of it. And I was looking a mess, makeup running down me. And I was sat on the windowsill of the cab office just next door to Bar Nova. And this 18-year-old lad came up and he said, "Are you Rob?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I just want to thank you for everything you've done." And I said, "Oh, you're very welcome." And he turned and he pointed to his friends and he said, "I've come down with them. This is my first Pride. I came out to my family last year and they kicked me out, but I feel like I found my family here." And he stood up and threw his arms around me and burst into tears. And I started to get all weepy as well. And like Nuala said, this is why you do things like that. You do it to make a difference to these people that need to find their home. They need to find a space. They need to find somewhere where they can be themselves without any kind of judgment. So that, knowing that I'd made a difference in just one person's life, that is probably the strongest memory and feeling that I will take away from all the Prides that I've been part of. Just knowing that, he felt safe enough to come up to me, a stranger as far as he was concerned, and say that and do that, but that he felt, after what he'd been through, he felt safe enough to come to Pride and be there. The fact that we created a safe space, I think that, that's always going to be one of my favouriteest memories of all the Prides that I've been part of. And of course, there is the silly one as well. That same year, my husband and John Quinlivan and myself and Shah and the gorgeous Jay Molyneux, we did our Steps tribute act, Styra, for 10 minutes on the stage, which was just, that was an absolute blast. So yeah, I have lots of fond memories, and some of them a lot more emotional than others, but yeah.
That's lovely. Well, and we're very jealous because I think 2017 was the last time it was sunny on a Saturday, and the last few years haven't been that way, but fingers crossed for this year. But I do remember 2019, during the parade, the rain was absolutely bucketing down on us, but I suppose that's what we get for trying to plan a Pride in Galway. Can't stop us though. But I suppose the parade is everyone's favourite event because it's the parade. But I wonder, maybe, Rob, beyond the parade, do you have any standout events that are just always your favourites?
The mental health night and the vigil. I think bringing people together to talk about mental health issues within the LGBTI plus community. I think it's so important that we acknowledge these exist and that we acknowledge that we're there to talk about it with each other. And I think trying to break down the stigmas around mental health within the LGBTI community it's going to be an ongoing fight for a long time. And the more we talk about it, the more likely we are to break down those stigmas. So that will always be one of my favourite events. But also the candlelit vigil. There's so many of us that have lost so many friends and family for various reasons within the LGBT community, be it HIV, be it, self-harm through suicide or anything like that. We've lost so many people that to have this candlelit vigil, to come together as a community and remember those we've lost and look at why we continue to fight this fight. I think the candlelit vigil is always such an emotional time, and it's always such a worthwhile event to attend. I've cried at every single one, and I have no problem admitting that. And the first year I went to it, I read a piece out about a friend that I'd lost, and I just bawled my eyes out. But the amount of support I got from every single person there. There was a group of guys underneath the Spanish Arch, and we walked down, and all of us were like, "Oh God, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be issues." They got up and joined in, and when I started crying, they were coming over and hugging me as well. It was such an amazing event. So yeah, the candlelit vigil and the mental health nights are always going to be some of my favourite events. I think they're two very important events. They're two very emotional events, and I love attending those.
That's a great choice. Nuala, what about yourself? Some favourite events?
Yeah, the candlelit, the vigil. That's a really important one for me too. Especially, there's a lot of people that are now gone that would have been part of making things happen in Galway that I would have met when I came to Galway. I came to Galway in '86. So, and I went looking for when we were trying to set up the helpline, and I was told that there was, I knew 5 women, that was kind of it. But I was told that gay people kind of hung out in Noctons. And I went into Noctons, and I was like, oh, excuse me, are you gay? And this guy put his arm around me and pulled me aside. He was like, what are you doing? I'm looking for gay men because we need people to do some training to do the helpline. He was saying, you can't be going up asking people, I was quite naive, really, at that time. I didn't see any harm in it whatsoever, but looking back, I was lucky I didn't. Anyway, but the guys I met then, and they're not all around anymore. And some women as well, there's some of them from back then, and they would have been probably in their 50s or more at the time. And although they wouldn't be on the parade, they would support things happening in other ways, which is also really important. You don't have to be out there, all the time. There's so many different ways in which people can get involved, volunteer their time, their skill in the background, if that's what they need to do for themselves. And I know if they were around now, and I always think of them, and many others as well, they'd be just so proud to see, all these things happening in Galway, all these people coming together and giving their time freely to make it happen, which is really important. And the huge benefits it has. I mean, yeah, sometimes I'm sure everybody involved in Pride over the years will have somebody come up to them and say, hey, thanks a million. This is my first Pride. And it's important to remember that no matter how many Prides you've been at or how many parades you've been on, each one, it's always a first for somebody. And it's always huge for somebody. And it's also, for so many people as well, it will also be a first time for them to actually see so many people being themselves, and and help them and be inspired to make that step, to make contact with whoever they need to make contact with. That's what Pride is all about, is, reaching out, supporting people come along and be themselves at some stage in whatever way they need to be. But the candlelit vigil is really important for that. And as well, because for me, Pride and the parade in particular is about acknowledging and respecting people way back before us who really, we all have our struggles in life, and regardless of how we identify, but back when it was like, people who really put themselves out there and risked everything in order for the likes of me growing up to somehow hear about the possibility of a community, about pride, about different things that is our history. We all need to know our own history. We all need to know where we're coming from. We all need to know where we're at in order for us to be able to move forward in a positive, well-rounded, healthy way, I think. And pride is all about that. It's about encompassing all of that. I'll stop talking.
That actually makes me think. I have a friend who, as a research project, has begun looking into his uncle, who was a gay man in the 70s and 80s from the Claddagh, but went to London and was part of London Pride and got arrested and everything a part of that. But to him, he was always just kind of a bit of somebody who drank too much and was kind of a bit scary, and that's all he ever knew of that person. And it wasn't until he researched his background after he passed away that he realized he had this queer life and obviously the queer struggle in a time where it was much more harder and it took a harder toll. So knowing that history is so important. But I suppose, like you said, Nuala, we're looking forward as well. And I'm wondering, Rob, do you have any hopes for Galway Pride as it continues to grow into the future?
Yes, I hope it. Sorry.
No, you're okay. You want to go first, Nuala? You're eager to go, so we'll let you go.
I hope it just keeps growing as it has been. I hope that it continues to be about the community, for the community, and the community focus. I hope that always stays there, regardless of how it's organised. I wouldn't like to see it developing into, very commercialised prides that have happened in other countries or cities or whatever, because if it loses the community focus, then it's it's not the same. I'd like to see. I was at one big pride in São Paulo a few years ago, and there was 5 million people at it. It was just blew me away, and I was saying, there's as many people here for this as there is in the country that I live, So, I suppose dream big. I'd like to see the whole country coming out, which they kind of do, mostly. The majority of them do. But mostly, I would love to be around when Pride and the parade and everything that happens is all just about celebration. That it would be wonderful that our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters in Ireland, in Europe, in the world, all over the world, that there wouldn't be all the persecution and homophobia and all of that. That would be incredible. An end to all of that, and all the prides everywhere is just total celebration, no protests, no political stuff going on, just a celebration. That's what I'd like to see.
Rob?
To be honest, I echo almost everything Nuala said. I long for a day where Pride isn't political, because we have no need to be political. I think people forget the Pride was based on political events, and as nice as it is to celebrate who we are and to celebrate who we are as a community, I think it's important to remember that it is essentially a political movement to try and bring about change for the better. And like Nuala said, I'd love to be around when we don't need to do that when we don't need to fight for change because nothing else needs changing, because we have the equality that we need. But until then, I, as Nuala said, I'd love to see Pride grow, especially Galway Pride. I think the work that every committee from day one up until now puts into Galway Pride, when you think about the size of Galway itself and the size of the LGBTI community within Galway, the fact that we put on these wonderful week-long events, the fact that we get the volunteers, we get a committee together, we get people to attend, I think that needs praising. And I think I'd love to see it grow. I'd love to see more people realise just how much work goes into it, and to attend and just enjoy the days and the fun and all the different events. And yeah, I'd love to see Pride grow, and I'd love it to be, as Nuala said, when we don't need it to be political. We need it just to celebrate us as a community. I think that's, to me, Pride has always been protest, because I've grown up during an era where we've had to protest because we've had very little equality. I grew up in the UK under Section 28, and I fought to get rid of that. I lived in Ireland when we had no marriage equality and helped fight for that. And I think it will be fantastic when we no longer have to get together for those reasons. Instead, we get together because, we're a fantastic community and we just want to have a party. So,
Yeah.
And I think we keep that hope alive for it just being able to be a celebration. And our theme for this year is hope, for lots of reasons. But obviously there's a lot of things to be hopeful for. And I grew up as a queer kid in Galway, born and raised, with Galway Pride happening every year, just basically in my back garden because it's right beside where I live. And it was happening every year because of the work you two put in, along with a lot of other people. So thank you for that, for all the work you put into Pride and for our community. And thanks for joining us today on this panel. And happy Pride.
Happy Pride to you.
Yeah, happy Pride. And thank you to this year and last year and every committee, but in particular throughout the pandemic. Thanks for making it happen.
Yeah, the fact
it's been
that
a huge challenge, I don't get it.
Yeah, the fact that you've still got together, you haven't said, do you know what, we'll just postpone and we'll come back when it's over. The fact that you put on online events last year and this year, and you've kept Pride alive, I think you and the committee deserve a massive round of applause and a big pat on the back for all that. It's not easy. It's not easy putting online events on. I speak from experience. It's not easy. So to see you do all that and to see you putting it all on and continuing, I think you've done an amazing job. So thank you to you and the committee for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Especially with our centre gone, that's been a huge source of support for so many within our community. And so in times like this, we need Pride even more, because the isolation that the whole country feels, but in particular our own community, it's really important. And well done to everybody involved. It's wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you, and I have to thank the committee as well, who have worked really hard through a pandemic and through losing Teach Solace. But as you have both said, this is about the community, and the community keep showing up and keep showing their support. So as long as that happens, there'll still be a Pride. So thanks, folks. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now I'm joined with the wonderful Morgan Queeney, a Pride savant who has long been active in the community. Morgan, you're very welcome. I want to start with the question I asked Rob and Nuala, which is, what was your first Pride?
My first Pride was, I think, Galway Pride, actually. Now, yeah, I think it was Galway Pride.
What year? Not the year you were chair, surely.
No, it wasn't the year I was chair. I had gone to 2 before it, but just very casually. I was always very interested, and I was like, oh my God, there's such a fuss, there's such a hype around it. Like, this seems like this mythical thing to me.
Drama, there's so much drama.
The drama. Oh, you love to see it. So I was super interested in that. And I also knew about its like context worldwide. So I was like, it's so cool that there's a Pride near me that I can go to. So I was so excited to go. And when I went, I was like, my expectations were blown away. It was just like queer event after queer event, and I was loving life. I think I went to Teastáil a number of times, and I hadn't even been a regular goer of Teastáil at the time. So that was like really special, and definitely I think Pride is such a melting pot for the community, and it definitely did that to me. So I think I'd gone twice before I was chair of Galway Pride. So and then I've been gone once since, because there's only been one since, I think, and now I'm going this year too.
Yeah. And so I think defining it as a melting pot's a really interesting idea, because we often kind of silo ourselves into our own groups. So I'm wondering, you know, what events would be your favorites that kind of highlight that sense of pride for you?
Any events that involve kids, I think, are so lovely, because what I've always found when I was a kid is I didn't have the language to discuss who I am and who I was, and that was like really detrimental to me. So I know the year I was there, we did an event in the library where, you know, some performers performed for kids, and they were doing Irish mythology and like the queer narratives within it. And I know this year I was the chair of Kingdom Pride in Kerry, and we did loads with park events, and that was so kid friendly. And I think there's something, and as a teacher myself, there's something so lovely about being able to put on like a really safe place for kids to explore themselves and to be themselves. And, you know, lovely to have other kind of events too, but that's one that always hits home for me, is just being able to see, like, we had some guys who came to Kingdom Pride this year, and they were 12, 13, 14 in a little group. And it was so special to see how far culture has come, that kids can now Google these things and they know now that they want to go to Pride at the age of 12. It's insane to me, and I love it. I love to see it. So anything to do with a kid-friendly space is, I think, some of the most rewarding Pride work that can be done.
Yes, that's so lovely. Yeah, because this year we're working with another number of youth groups like Corlin and Ogan, Youth Work Ireland. And what we did was actively consult what did they want to see. And one of the things they highlighted was they want to go to drag events, but they're often 18 plus because they're taking place in bars. So one of the things we're doing for them is a workshop of drag makeup, as well as a youth picnic. So absolutely incorporating people under the age of 18, because it's not just queer culture but Irish culture to have so many events that are 18 plus, even when they don't necessarily have to be.
I completely agree. And I also know that like kids have this fascination with drag, because drag is nearly the same process as growing up. It's just playing around with what works until you're like, looks good, I'll pretend I'm that now. And becoming an adult is a very, very similar process. You just try on different vibes until you're like, okay, this is the person I'm becoming now. I think that kids love drag because it's very silly, it's very free. And at the same time, you know, when you are a drag artist, you can take that and elevate it to certain levels, but there's an undeniable fun to drag. I know my younger cousins who are teenagers now, from when they were babies, have been dressing up as drag artists. And, you know, one of them is called Delfina Martinez. I couldn't possibly list the other name of the other one because it's too rude. But, you know, they love that kind of thing. And I love drag story time. I think Mayo Pride did a drag story time. And I just, anything that involves kids, drag, playing around, or understanding from a young age that expression is so fluid, is some of the best work that you can be doing for kids out there, I think.
And so you clearly have this passion for what Pride and Pride events can have for so many different types of people. So when did you make that switch from being somebody who went to Pride to being involved with Pride and organising Pride?
I feel like I did that against my own will. I feel like
we all do.
Galway Pride was like, oh, we need another person to come on, and I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'll see you there. So I kind of like fell into being the chair of Galway Pride, and it was fun. It was so fun, and we were so lucky with the committee that we had, and that everybody was there in good faith and really wanted to do good work. And it's been astonishing, because you get very big personalities in Pride, and then you get such genuine love of the community, which is amazing to see, given that, you know, we're a community of individuals. We all have an individual idea of what is best for Pride and what is best for representation of us as a community on a whole. So it makes sense to me that there's that conflict there sometimes, but I've been blessed and incredibly lucky to have worked with some of the most admirable people that this country has to offer, quite honestly, that they might not even be out fully, but they're dedicating their work and their time and their kindness and effort to Pride and stuff like that. So I suppose the switch came. I was chair of Galway Pride for 2019 for the 30th anniversary. And I was just continually and still am inspired by the hard work of people around me. And ever since then, I've got the Pride bug. Even when the pandemic hit, I had been working in Kerry to do Pride, and we decided, you know what, we can't justify having something out in public right now. It's too dangerous. So we had Pride Inside, which is like an online festival, and it had Kerry, Killarney, Limerick, Black Pride Ireland, Galway, Mayo, Sligo working together. And that was phenomenal. That was a lovely thing to do as well, and such a challenge in some senses, but amazing to surmount and to see people working together on that broader spectrum. It really was like a West Pride, and it was gorgeous to be able to unite rural people and to, plan together our resources.
And I think that's probably the story that people will look back at in this era of Pride, is adapting to the pandemic. So you were the co-chair of Galway Pride in 2019, our last in-person pre-COVID, I suppose, Pride, which feels very different to now. So how was that shift to the online field?
The online shift was interesting. Like literally as soon as we had the idea, we were like, let's go. But it took a long time. It took a couple of weeks to be like, how do we navigate this? And even now doing Pride in the Kingdom, it's made us a lot more resourceful. I will say that, in my head, Pride was, and as I'd always done it, as I'd always experienced it, it was like very much to do with the hospitality sector. You worked with businesses and venues and you put stuff on there. And for a lot of our events, and I have to pay credit to Limerick Pride, Mayo Pride, for the ideas that they'd come up with, but we did a lot of beach swims, we did hikes, we did walks. It made us, properly utilize the scenery that we had, because indoor dining was a no-no. And because there was a lot of venues that we just couldn't get access to because of safety. So even for example, we had a park event, everybody in the Kingdom had to fill in a COVID form. That's not something you ever would think that you'd have to do, but it was great. And there was lots of great upsides to it as well. There was people saying, the information that I've given you on this COVID form, I want you to use it to keep in touch with me. I want to know when the next thing is happening. There's also people saying, this is amazing. This is, a way to keep in touch and to keep track of our numbers, because I feel like so often with Pride, the finer details of what we've actually pulled off gets lost because we're so busy doing the next thing. So it was lovely to be able to count attendance, and it was lovely to be able for people to say, I want to keep in touch with you, and us to go, great, cool. So it paid off a lot. If you've got the right attitude, you can work even something as objectively bad as a pandemic to spin some ingenuity and to work harder to be safer.
So focus on that sort of change. You went from Galway in 2019 to Kerry in 2020, and Galway's loss is Kerry's gain, I suppose. But what's that shift like? Galway's obviously very urban-centred, too urban-centred, really. So what's that shift like to a more rural Pride?
To a more rural Pride, it's funny because when I was in Galway, I was like, oh, we're one of the smaller Prides, compared to the juggernauts that are Dublin and Cork. And I was like, okay, well, working with a smaller Pride, we're on a smaller budget, things are more homemade, cool. And then I moved to Kerry and I was like, I am in a small Pride now. There's no money to be had. Sponsors were very hard to come by. However, what I will say is that there's such a magic in seeing the place where you grew up. And when we grow up in a homophobic or queerphobic society, we internalize that queerphobia, and it takes a lot of work to unlearn that, all that cool stuff. But seeing the physical landscape of the place where you grew up and experienced queerphobia, becoming more queer is incredibly healing. It's the physical site of healing, is being able to be like, oh my God, okay, so we're having this in this park where, you know, normally I wouldn't even have my pride flag on display, and now it's an incredibly big, safe place for queer people to be. And I think that it's been a lovely experience. The community, once we were a little bit established, there was huge buy-in. I know that even after Pride was done, there were shops putting up displays. There was a wedding shop who put up a little display like saying Happy Pride, and they didn't communicate that with us at all because they just saw it was on and they wanted to join in. It's been lovely. And what I have to say is I think there's very few places in Ireland that are actually conservative. I would argue that there's no rural places that are purposefully conservative. I would argue there's rural places that are under-resourced, and that's it. You know, once given the opportunity to be accepting, I think rural places definitely take that up. And cities, of course, are melting pots of culture. But no, it's been phenomenal, and it is much harder. You're fighting an uphill battle, definitely. You have less contacts and you have to build it from the ground up, and there's less resources, blah, 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 blah. It's amazing payoff. It's amazing fun. And you know as well that there's somebody who is internalizing this message that I internalized when I was younger, and many people did around me, that they don't have to immigrate. They don't have to go somewhere else. They don't have to go to a city to start living their life. That their queer life, their whole life, their full life can begin at home. And that's, that's phenomenal. Where else could you get that? That's something that, every person who volunteers gets to be proud of and stand over and say, I am helping somebody feel more at home in the place where I, growing up, maybe didn't feel as at home.
Yeah, no, that's an incredibly strong message, I think, because you hear that even here in Galway, people feel like they have to leave Galway to really be their true queer selves. And if that's a message that we can say in Galway and Mayo and Kerry, when I had the pleasure of being down in Kingdom Pride in what has to be said was ungodly heat. But seeing,
I'm still burnt.
Oh, absolutely.
I have loads of filters on me, of course, and I'm being paid millions to be here. But lads, without this tech magic, I'm as red as a lobster.
Just a big tomato. But when we powered through the heat, there were so many young queer teens just being openly queer in the middle of tSlí, and it was just fantastic to see. And I think it's a credit to yourself that you and so many others were able to put that together, and you should be very proud of that. I suppose, Morgan, just to finish up, what is your hope for Pride going forward, be it Kerry, Galway, or wherever?
I think Pride internationally is changing, and it's been very interesting to see that change. It had its roots in riots and in our oppression, and I don't know what it's changing into, but I think it's become that and an ode to that. And also there's like this culture of it being a resting place to call home once a year, and big events as well. It's a celebration as well as a time to reflect. The only thing that Pride ever is stably is coming together. That's the only thing I associate with Pride that is like consistent. If you go to a place that is Pride is a party, we come together, or Pride is a riot, we come together. That's the only consistent thread. What I would love to see for it going forward is more ally support, is for more variety of what we put on, because, the events that I am passionate about might not be the events that everyone is passionate about, but I would like for everyone to be represented. Would love for more resources. I would love for it to spread more into rural counties, if we're being specific just to Ireland. And I would love more maybe support all around, just for counties that probably don't have a Pride yet, that at the moment, to some young or any queer person, they're thinking to themselves, this place is unlivable because this place is not accepting of me. I would love for Pride, and importantly, year-long resources to spring up in that place, and for anyone to be able to live anywhere happily and safely and healthily.
Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. Never stop being you. Also, big thanks to Nuala and Rob. I've been Owen, the chair of Galway Pride. This has been the Road to Pride. Thank you for everyone who has watched along. Our next panel is the Intersex Panel, and if you want to catch Morgan in all their glory, they will be hosting our sunset ceremony at Saturday at 8 p.m. in Salt Hill, so please do see us there. But until next time, thanks everyone, and thanks Morgan.
Not at all. Thank you so much, Owen.
Slán.